All right, so today let's get into how we train in terms of what my sources are and what I experienced in high school and what I kept and what I changed in college and then into my coaching time. So the interesting interweaving here is my high school coach, Jim Macnider, ran for my college coach, Carius. And as I happened to have a senior history project in college that was about the history of my college program, talking with guys that ran in the 1960s and ran in the 1970s at North Central College, several of them had told me that Jim Macnider very much pushed for certain things that became workouts, that became traditions, that became part of what North Central's training was. But I want to make clear the training I did in high school was very different than the training I did in college, and I think that's the difference between running a 3-mile race versus running a 5-mile race versus running a 5K versus a 3K versus a 10K in college. So all that stuff is different. So let's start with my high school coach. In high school, we would typically do workouts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday would all be double days. Would be morning run in the morning and then after school and afternoon school run. And then we would run at a solid tempo, probably over pace of what we should be doing and pushing too hard on those Monday, Wednesday, Friday runs. And then our Tuesday, Thursdays were typically interval. And if we're looking at sources of that it looks a lot like Igloy. All right, and it's not 40 quarters or anything insane like that, but 12 to 16 400s or something like 3, 4, 5 miles worth of half miles or something like that would make sense of what we did at a high school level. From my perspective, looking back on it without ever actually sitting down with Mac to talk about it, my assumption would be, based on my experience in coaching high school athletes, would be high school athletes are usually not disciplined enough and not trustworthy enough to go out and do long tempo runs on their own. The more segmented your runs are and the more you can watch your athletes, I think the better it is for high school athletes who are still learning the sport and learning their bodies and learning how to do what they're doing. So what I didn't say about my high school training is I didn't say anything about our long run. In high school, our long runs would usually be Tuesday, Thursday, long runs in the summer, but we wouldn't really do a long run during the high school season. Whether or not that's changed as Mac has moved into college coaching at Harper College at a JUCO, I couldn't tell you. But we didn't really have a day for a long run in the Lydiard go out and run for 90 minutes or something like that, or the long run is it's become part of the mythology of Colorado University's Buffalo, right? And that's cross. It's easier to talk about cross than it is to talk about track, because track you've got more dual meets and you've got all sorts of different schedules. As I look at the schedule for my college program, mostly cross-country. Track was not that dissimilar. At North Central College on Mondays, you would go out and you do mile repeats, or mile intervals, actually, is probably the more correct way of saying it. That at the end of the season turned into half-mile, more repeats than intervals at that point. Tuesday would typically feel like a recovery day. Wednesday would be a tempo run, hill segment, and then intervals on the back end of it. So that would be our hill day. Thursday, if we were racing on Saturday, would be the longer day. If we raced on Friday, Thursday would be a pre-meet, with Friday being a race day. If we raced on Saturday, Thursday would be the long day, with Friday being pre-meet. And then a long run on Saturday if we raced on Friday, and then Sunday was an on-your-own run. Interesting to note, at North Central, you would do 5-day-a-week morning runs, so you would do morning runs on workout days. When I was there was a big push by Al not to have the freshmen do morning runs, and I kept on looking at Al saying, look, if you don't want me doing 5 days a week morning run, that's fine. But for 3 years, I did 3-day-a-week morning runs. At minimum, I'm going to keep doing that at my freshman year. And I can bike on Tuesday, Thursday. I can swim run on Tuesday, Thursday. I can sleep in if you really need me to sleep in on Tuesday, Thursday because you don't want me doing 5-day-a-week morning runs. But I'm not going to do less than I did in high school. And that was probably a mistake. I probably overloaded myself on my mileage there. But in reality, that's what I thought I needed to do. Both of those guys, both Al Carius and Jim Macnider, really built a lot of what they did around Arthur Lydiard. And I'm going to do my first show and tell here. All right, this is the picture I'm in that I'm least qualified for in my life. That's Tom Roderick, Arthur Lydiard, Al Carius, Joe Newton, the moron that's talking to you that does not belong in that picture compared to those other 4 people. Very blessed in a lot of things I did at North Central, where I'd be able to go and meet Arthur Lydiard because he happens to be in town, or hey, come over here and shake Jim Spivey's hand, he's a 3-time Olympian, or hey, go hang over with Ken Popejoy, who's this amazing storyteller, number 1, but number 2, an amazing miler. And Lydiard's belief is you're going to go out and you're going to do more and more mileage, you're going to add up what your workload capacity is, and you're going to get stronger as you're able to do that. Someone that's able to run for a longer period of time at the same pace is going to be stronger than someone who runs a shorter period of time for that pace. So the basic principle that I build my program around is from week to week, we either want to run a faster pace over the same distance, or we want to run the same pace over a longer distance. It's one of those two. If you try to run for a longer distance at a faster pace than what you've done before, you're typically going to be unsuccessful. So I've got one more person to talk about as I build into what I do and take you through a day by day what my workouts would look like or what our routines would look like. Is when I first decided to come to Waubonsee Valley, I got recruited by the head coach, Chris Wolak, Jed Kabowski, who was a Waubonsee Valley graduate, was my teammate at North Central. We went over to watch the Crete Moni flight invite together, and I was getting ready to do my student teaching that next fall, and he introduced me, and Mr. Wolak asked me to come in, student teach for him, be an assistant coach, and basically his plea to me was, look, I don't know the physiology of what we're doing. You know, I'll do all the paperwork, you write all the workouts, we'll be really successful. And so basically I was walking in being, in terms of writing workouts, going to be a head coach. As we got into that summer, I found out, the name got back to me, there was a guy who was going to come in and be a co-head coach, and the person's name was Dave Severance. Called up Jed's, asked, hey, what do you know about this guy? Should I change where I'm going? Because I really wanted to jump into being a head coach right away. Jed had real positive things to say about him. You know, in my time I've spent with Coach Sev is probably one of the best physiological coaches I've ever met. He really knows how to train athletes to be ready to go. It was a very big learning experience for me because Coach Sev did things very differently than what Jim Macnider or Al Carius did, and yet that first year we worked together in 2001, fall of 2001, first time since I was in high school, Waubonsee Valley qualified for the state meet, and we finished 5th in the state meet. So the things I've taken from Coach Sev is we do a 4-mile threshold pace workout where you want to see how fast you can run over 4 miles. And at different teams, when we got into that 07 cross-country team that ended up finishing 4th in state, took kids into 5 miles and 6 miles because they started to race that 4 miles because they were that fit. So in order to get the workout we needed, we went to 5 miles and 6 miles. And this last year, cross-country of 2019, I did that with several of my upperclassmen because we were starting to get too fit. When you get into 22 minutes for 4 miles and 21 minutes for 4 miles, you're not running a threshold pace anymore. You're racing that. The other thing that I took from Coach Sev is I kept something. We sat down and we watched Kevin Christensen from Stillwater, Minnesota, who I believe I have the right Christensen, does a lot of flying 30s. You're going to work on your ATP development. You're going to get to work on your flat-out speed. You're going to work on your ability to turn over on a 3 to 4 minute interval. If you don't do 3 to 4 minute intervals, you lose the physiological benefit of that. So we sat there at the Racy and Razzo Distance Summit and listened to that, and we put that into our workouts ever since. And I like that, and I keep that. I do that on both recovery run days and long run days, depending on the week. But if you're a new head coach, one of the biggest things that I can tell any head coach, don't try to just copy the person that was there before you. When I took over for Coach Severance between the end of the 2007 cross-country season, the 2008 track season, I had a 4th in state cross-country team. I had an all-stater in Mark Schumacher. I had a near all-stater in David Schumacher. And I told those guys, look, my first year here, I'm going to try to keep everything the way Sev would do it. I'm going to do a few things to change things on my own. And I totally mismanaged it. There were things that Sev did that he had a feel for that I didn't have a feel for. There were things that he did that I did slightly differently. I would tell any coach that's taking over, whoever the previous person is, whatever their success level was, keep what you want, push out everything else. Don't try to be a carbon copy of someone else, because you can't run someone else's training program. You have to run a program you know and you understand and you have faith in. And one of the biggest things I did in my switch from how Sev did things to how I did things is I moved stuff more so to what I saw from Coach Macnider and more of that Igloy sort of training, where we do a lot of quarters, we do a lot of half miles, and we do 1200s, and we do stuff like that. And I watched them the whole time, because I had a group of guys that were really good guys, but they need to really be watched. And they really needed to be paid attention to on what their pace was. And I had certain kids that need to be pulled earlier, because they would, even if they were feeling awful and they went from 5-minute pace to 6-minute pace to 6:30 pace, they'd keep going into the next interval, because they thought they'd have to do the volume that would be laid out ahead of time. So a lot of what I do is based on Arthur Lydiard and that upping the mileage, Igloy, and segmenting how you do your hard intervals. And I take a lot of stuff from Coach Severance, who's stolen from Christensen and stolen from a number of different other people. Quick idea that I want to talk about, that in today's track and field society, especially in Illinois, especially in the western suburbs, you've got people that love speed and love talking about speed. Al Carius, the entire time I've known him, has had this mantra: strength is speed. Here's one of my favorite things he did with recruits to talk about what he wanted to do and why Lydiard was going to make sense. He would ask a kid, are you capable of running 4 minutes? And the kid would sort of petter on, and Al would stop and said, wait, you are capable of running under 4 minutes. What's your best 400? If the kid said under 60 seconds, he said, then you have the speed to run under 4 minutes. We have to build the endurance to run under 4 minutes. And that's something I thoroughly believe in. Our goal is to build strength. Most kids can run under 60 seconds for the quarter. Almost every kid can run under 15 seconds for the 100, 30 seconds for the 200. We have to build that strength to take the speed that they can already hit over a longer and longer and longer and longer distance. We do flying 30s, not for the speed of the flying 30s, but for the ATP development, and that's where I do a lot of my small changes in where your hands come, how high your knee comes, and what are you dorsiflexing your foot as you're coming down towards the ground, all of that sort of stuff. We do strides at the end of the workouts, 100-meter strides, 200-meter strides, 300-meter strides during tracks sometimes. That's not really developing speed. When I was a jumps coach for both boys and girls at Waubonsee Valley, we had 2 young ladies in the 800 who were trying to figure it out, and I did step in a little bit, and I did a little coaching at the conference meet. But I sat with 2 of the half-milers who were really upset about how they did, and we watched Alyssa Schneider, who ran for Bartlett at that time, was an All-Stater, went on to run for U of I, and was a national qualifier for U of I, and I had them run a watch on her as she moved up through the field, had this real big kick, and ran away from everyone. And what I pointed out was, look, it looks like she's running faster and running away from people. That's not what she's doing. Her pace is actually getting slower from one lap to the next, but she's falling off pace less than other people. In a distance race, when it looks like someone makes a great move or it does this big increase in speed, it's often not an increase in speed. It's a falling off the pace less horribly than everybody else. And so a lot of what our training is building into, can you hold that pace? Can you hold that pace for longer? Or can you run the same distance for a faster pace as we go throughout the course of your season, your year, and your time in high school, and then college, if that's going to be something that goes on for you. So next time we get together, we'll talk about our Monday workouts and what those look like, and see if we give you a little nugget of something you can use in your own training.